Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Skew Zone Week 3 already. Time flies. We are here as a proud sponsor of Time Skew. We are Time Skew's branch, the Skew Zone, live every Wednesday at 7. You could catch us 7 to 8 Central Time on Time Skew's YouTube and on StreamYard as well. We have a lot of things to go over today. We have a lot of guests for today's show, a lot of topics of conversation. It's going to be a great show. We're very excited. We have four guests. We have Cleve and me host Joe Areola to be joining us about the Colts at 7:10. Then at 7:20, we have Bill Granado, co-host of Cardboard and Cracker Jacks, to go over some Bears talk. Then at 7:30, we are joined by A-Cats, Andrew Katzman, long time no talk, a great guy. He's going to go over the Buccaneers and what they're up to, and that'll be 7:30. And then at 7:50, we have Big Mike from Big Rican on Sports, and we're going to be talking some Cleveland Browns and maybe some other things as well. To start off, we're going to go over Ravens Steelers, and we'll eventually get into Tyreek Hill, Antonio Gibson, big fantasy days. Matt Patricia's firing as well, but we did have Wednesday football. Can't even say Wednesday night football. Sadly, it was Wednesday football. It was 2:30 or 2:40 Central Time. Excuse me. It was a division rivalry game in the AFC. It was big playoff stakes on the line. The undefeated 10-0 Pittsburgh Steelers faced off at home against the 6-4 Baltimore Ravens, the Lamar Jackson list Ravens, the multiple running back list Ravens, the Mark Andrews list Ravens. The list went on and on. COVID attacked them. This was obviously supposed to be the Thanksgiving nightcapper. Instead, it extended until today. Fantasy matchups, fantasy waiver wires, everything has gone haywire accordingly. It's been pretty crazy, but and nonetheless, we had football today. Ugly game, 19-14 Steelers win. They remain undefeated, and they're 11-0. Baltimore falls to 6-5 and out of the playoff picture. So if Baltimore won today, they would have had the 7 seed, and the Colts would have been on the outside looking in. But instead, it's Baltimore losing, and now the Baltimore Ravens are on the outside looking in. Baltimore is led by Robert Griffin today, who left the game with an injury. Before he left, he was 7 of 12 for 33 yards and 1 interception with no touchdowns. He also carried 7 times for 68 yards. Trace McSorley was 2 of 6 for 77 yards and a touchdown in his NFL debut, relieving Robert Griffin. So that was cool to see. And then for the Steelers side of the football, throwing wise, Ben Roethlisberger went 36 of 51, a lot of throws for 266 yards, a touchdown and a pick each. Obviously, James Conner was out with COVID as well, so they used Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland. Snell had 16 for 60 on the ground. McFarland 3 for 9 on the ground. Eric Ebron led all fantasy PPR guys for the Steelers besides Juju Smith. Juju Smith had 8 for 37 and a touchdown. Ebron had 7 for 54. Claypool 6 for 52. Those are all receptions, of course. So the Steelers win in ugly fashion. It was a cold game. A lot of running happened, not a lot of passing. And the passing that did happen did not look good. Ravens, fantasy-wise, Trace McSorley, obviously nobody started him. Nobody probably rosters him. Was 2 of 6, 77 yards and a touchdown. RG3 did have 68 yards on the ground, but he did not have a good fantasy day at all. Marquise Brown led the way for the Ravens with 4 receptions, 85 yards and a touchdown. Week 12 is officially behind us, and there were some big fantasy performers in this past week, and it was the longest week in NFL history, according to ESPN insider Adam Schefter. And I believe that's because there was the Thanksgiving morning day game with the Lions and Texans, which ultimately led to Matt Patricia's dismissal. We'll get into that a little bit later as well, but that game started very early, and obviously it didn't end until Wednesday, 2:40 kickoff Central Time. So it was just a really long week, but we did have a two really, really big time performers, two big time playmakers in fantasy football that stood out above the rest this week. We'll get into them quickly before we segue into Matt Patricia, and then our Colts contributor and insider, Joey, the host of Cleve and me, will be joining us in about 5 minutes here. But real quick, Antonio Gibson this week had an incredible Turkey Day game and a win over the Dallas Cowboys to help Washington football team be tied for first against or I'm sorry, not against, but with the New York Giants. Giants own the tiebreaker right now. But yeah, Giants own the tiebreaker. But anyways, Antonio Gibson had 20 for 115 and 3 touchdowns. And then he had 5 catches for 21 yards. So in non-PPR leagues, he had 31.6 points. In PPR leagues, full point, he had 36.6. Antonio Gibson had a monster week. His schedule is tough the next coming games. He's at Pittsburgh week 13, oftentimes the last regular season week for fantasy footballers, and he's at San Francisco. That's never easy as well. They're getting healthy. They got Richard Sherman back, but then he's home against Seattle. Their rush hasn't been much this year, but then home against Carolina, that's tough. At Philly, he has a pretty tough schedule remaining, so we'll see how that one turns out. Antonio Gibson is playing really good right now, though, and he is the 5th ranked running back in non-PPR leagues. If you took him, it's paid off. I've taken him as high as the 3rd round this year. I've got looked at funny. It was a non-PPR league. I said, hey, I'm putting my money on Antonio Gibson. And let me tell you, it's paid off big time. Thank you, Antonio Gibson, for delivering me a Turkey Day fantasy, or Turkey Week fantasy victory, excuse me. And next up, the bigger performer. He is now ranked number 1 in non-PPR fantasy formats, averaging a whopping 17.5 points a game. Obviously, this last game inflated those numbers, almost doubling his recent or past highest score this season. His past highest was week 9, where he registered 9 catches for 113 and 2 touchdowns and 1 carry for 8 yards. He had 24.1 points that week in non-PPR formats. This week against Tampa Bay, man, Tampa Bay, ugly week. They're playing ugly. We'll get into them more at the 7:30 hour with AK. It's Andrew Katzman's joining us to talk Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Tyreek Hill, fantasy, 13 catches for 269, 3 touchdowns. He had 44.9 fantasy points in non-PPR formats. That was incredible. That was a big-time performance from Tyreek Hill. So Antonio Gibson and Tyreek Hill were 2 big-time performers this week in fantasy. We'll get into more later if we do get time. But real quick, before Joe joins us, we want to talk about the Matt Patricia firing. Matt Patricia is another coach in the coaching carousel who has been dismissed already. Midway through the season, it's been an abnormal amount of coaches dismissed to this point. That's already Dan Quinn from Atlanta. Then you had obviously the dude from Houston, Bill O'Brien, Bob. He's so forgettable. I couldn't remember his name for a minute. Man, that guy was a sad loser. But anyways, then you had Matt Patricia. And then the list probably isn't going to stop there. You're probably going to have Adam Gase this offseason, Doug Marrone this offseason, Vic Fangio, along others. The coaching carousel is never ending, and it makes you wonder why the Lions fired Jim Caldwell to begin with, the man who brought them not only to the playoffs, but had a really good record with the team overall as a head coach. And then Matt Patricia came in, and struggled mightily. Other than that, real quick here, before we continue talking, we are Time Skew Podcast for the holiday season. We are running a special right now. Cyber Monday's over, Black Friday's over, but don't let the deal stop there. You could save 10% today, 10% now. Head on over to timeskew.com/shop. Code is STREAM to save 10% now on your holiday needs. Once again, we have mugs, we have shirts, we have a bunch of stuff. My, oh my, it's great. We have a lot of Time Skew gear, stocking stuffers, gifts. Go get it at timeskew.com/shop. Type in code STREAM to save 10% today. I'll display that right there in the comments below. You could see it on the screen. I'll leave that up for a little bit. Without further ado, it's already 7:10. It's that time for our first guest. We're about to be joined by the host of Cleve and me, Joseph. He's a Colts insider. Actually, wrote for Time Skew a little bit about the Colts. Without further ado, we're going to bring him in here quickly. Joe, thanks for being able to join us here. How you doing tonight?
Good man, how are you? I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about football. And
You got your
yeah, it's
mic
like
on mute. I think you got to unmute yourself. It's a little tricky at first. Try
on
and get.
here. Yeah, so I mean, like it's good to be on and at Cleve and me, as like you said, you announced it. It's a wrestling podcast, and I appreciate the shout out there. And also, we're both a part of Time Skew Pod. So yeah, at TSP underscore, you can find all the podcasts, and it's going to be a good time. I appreciate for having me on talking Colts football and
Yeah,
fantasy.
yeah. Colts football. Sorry, the error was on my end. But we're glad to have you on talking Colts football as well. Uh, Obviously, we're having some audio technical difficulties here. Can you mute the TV out there, please? Uh, Sorry about this, gang. It's a little echoey. Obviously, the TV is on out there, and there is viewers out here, as you can tell. But nonetheless, now the TV's off. Hopefully, they're
Is it better now?
yeah, it's a lot better now. Sorry about that, gang. We had the TV on. People love watching the time skew. People love tuning in. So that's where the error occurred. Now it's a lot better. Joe, thanks for tuning us. Sorry about the rough start. How we doing?
No, yeah, all apologies there. We had a couple people watching it as well. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. As I said it twice. I'll say it again. Just at Cleve and me for our wrestling podcast with my partner Cleveland, and we want to talk Colts football. Want to talk fantasy. Get down to business after that little technical difficulty debacle. But hey, it's 2020. It happens to everybody, right? So screw it. Let's talk some football.
So, how many fantasy leagues are you in, and how many playoffs are you pushing at this point in time? Who are some guys on the Colts who have helped you to this point, or maybe who could help you make a run for the playoffs? Who are you telling people to own for the Indianapolis Colts at this point in time?
Well, to be honest with you, to get back to your first question, I'm in about five fantasy leagues right now. I do not like that. I wish I was in two or three, to be honest, to be way better, just because keep track of players easier and not have to root for a bunch of other leagues and then you're against those people. But am doing good in four out of the five and making playoff pushes in those. So I'm happy about that. And Colts wise, man, it's a lot of people are probably frustrated this year. Honestly, having Colts players, even though they are 7-4, they have a good defense. But Philip Rivers likes to spread the ball around a lot. So in a two quarterback league, Philip Rivers is looking like a good number two right now. If I had to, honestly, I always revert back to the old faithful, but I think T.Y. Hilton, if he is a free agent in fantasy leagues right now, I would pick him up in his last game. It was the best to this point. He had 85 yards, I believe, with a touchdown, and that was his first touchdown in a long time. So he's healthy right now. He's playing Houston next week, where he usually plays good. Jonathan Taylor is also off the COVID list and going to play again. So I expect, running back. You never know which one will get it. If I had to pick Naheem Hines, but yeah, I'd probably see T.Y. Hilton's my guy to watch out for in the second half.
Yeah, T.Y. Hilton last week had his old T.Y. Hilton type like game with 4 receptions for 81 yards and a touchdown. And then the prior weeks before that, obviously it wasn't T.Y. Hilton like. So now let's hope he could stay on track. Houston is very poor defensive backs. Vernon Hargraves is a starter for them. That's where you know they're going wrong when a guy like that is starting for your football team. That's never a good thing. So let's see if the Indianapolis Colts and T.Y. Hilton could help your fantasy team this week. I do agree that Philip Rivers is looking good as a fantasy number two quarterback, and he's battling an injury, but he says it's not a problem. He says he's going to play this week. Honestly, Philip Rivers' passing yards per game has been tremendous. He hasn't really turned the ball over much since week 6. I mean, I'm just going to go over his numbers here quickly. Uh,
Please do.
it's not a lie. In week 6 against Cincinnati, he threw 371 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Then week 7 bye week 8, 262 against Detroit, 3 touchdowns, no turnovers. Week 9, 227, no touchdowns, 1 interception. That was his little blemish. Then he gets back on track. 308 against the Titans for a touchdown, no turnovers. 288 for 3 touchdowns against Green Bay, 1 interception, 295 against Tennessee, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he's been playing tremendous football lately. What do you say about the people who are saying, like Rex Ryan and company, the clowns of the media, the clowns of the world? What do you say to those people who say perhaps that Philip Rivers is too old to play this game?
There is definitely a lot more of that in the off season. Being Philip Rivers hurt my team a lot in the past years, 2007, 2008 playoff games with the Chargers. I was never a huge fan, but he's a winner. And I was actually happy when he came to Indianapolis. I thought he was the missing piece from us being a non-playoff team to a playoff team. And to this point, it's worked. We're 7-4. We're in the wild card position, only one game back behind Tennessee, who we split with this year, and have Houston a couple of times coming up with all the pieces they're missing. So hopefully we can take advantage of that. And Philip Rivers has just led the charge. He's a good leader. His arm is still clearly there. He spreads the ball out very nicely now in fantasy. That's not good because you never know who's going to get it. But after, without a preseason, without being able to play with any of these guys, he was always used to having, they're told that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, he had good weapons and everything. He can't do it. Well, Colts don't have the best weapons. They have decent to above average weapons. Everyone has a good role they play, but none of them are perfect. And he just spreads it out and gets it done. So I think he's been a great addition, and I hope to see us in the postseason this year to prove that it's worth his signing for the contract he had. Into the clowns, like Rex Ryan. Hey, he had to apologize the other day, so I'm going to let the proof keep talking because they got some work to do themselves after that loss to the Titans.
Yeah, they definitely have some work to do themselves, but they're doing pretty good. They're in the playoffs right now. They're in seventh. If the playoffs were to start today, I'd say the Colts would be happy with that. Colts fans just want to see them get into the playoffs. At the end of the day, you just have to get into the dance, and then it depends what happens at the dance, how that plays out. Once again, we're here with the co-host or host of Cleve and Me, a wrestling podcast, could be found on the TSPN Times Skew Podcast Network under the podcast sub tab. Joe, he's a Colts fan. He's here to help us out with the Colts for a couple more minutes before we're welcomed in and joined by Bill Granado. He'll be joining us for the Chicago Bears, co-host of Cleve and Me shortly. Or not Cleve and Me, I'm sorry, Cardboard and Cracker Jacks. Without further ado, we'll continue with the co-host of Cleve and Me, Joe. Joe, a couple more Colts questions here. Defensively, I know they got a lot of good things going on. They're pretty good ranked in fantasy too, as well. That's for sure. What makes this defense stand out as a fantasy football defense? I know they don't have a lot of flashy names, but guys like Darius Leonard and company help contribute to that defense immensely. Who are some of these underlying shining stars of that defense?
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought the defense up. And by the way, Billy Granado, shout out. He's been a guest on Cleve and Me, so he's definitely a quality guy and could talk good about the Bears, even though I gave him a thumbs down. But back to Colts on the defense. I go one player on each level. I'm going to start with the D line, and that's DeForest Buckner. We traded our first round pick away. It was pick number 13, and people clearly thought we'll see what happens there, but he's proven with his quarterback hurries being top five in his position, and bringing pressure and just adding to the defensive line, making guys like Grover Stewart better next to him. Second level, it's Darius Leonard. The passion and energy he brings is out of this world. And I mean, he was an all pro before, and he's just a stud. His stats prove for himself with all the tackles, and he'll get a fumble here, interception there. So he does very good with that. And he's just the heart and soul. And then on the third level, there's a couple guys I'd like. Kenny Moore at cornerback. He's our man coverage guy. He'll blitz, and he brings that passion. And Julian Blackman, rookie. So those five guys I'd like to give a shout out to because they've just been holding that stable together as a top five unit on defense.
Yeah, Julian Blackman, the rookie's been tremendous. And then also, I wonder if more teams are going to try and follow Chris Ballard's footprint with the DeForest Buckner trade of trading draft picks for quality football players, helping to win now. Football's kind of becoming more of like a baseball and basketball at the trade deadline, where it's more active preseason. More trades are happening too around the draft. So I think DeForest Buckner was a great addition and really helped propel that defense in the right direction and help hopefully lead them to the playoffs. Real quick here before we let Joe go, we're going to do some crosstalk here. We're going to do a couple minutes of crosstalk. We're going to bring in Bill. We're going to have some
Wow.
cross fantasy football talk. Let's get Bill in. We're going to add him to the stream. Bill, how
Oh.
are we doing, man? How are we tonight? You're muted, buddy. You're muted. It's all good.
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. How are you guys?
Hey, there's been a couple technical difficulties. You're right. We've been talking football, and hey, nice to see you again, Bill.
Hey, you too. Hey, I just want to give a shout out to Cleveland Me.
Yeah, the raffle winner.
Contest winner. I got my shirt. Tony, did you get yours?
Yeah, I got my shirt. I won Cleveland Me. I got a Gronk shirt, Gronk Mania shirt. It was beautiful. Once again, Cleveland Me, a proud member of the TSPN. Go check them out on Time Skewed. We are here talking fantasy football real quick. I just want to ask you guys, we're all in the same league together. We're doing crosstalk. What happened when you guys played this year? Have you guys played yet? If so, who won that matchup and why? What fantasy players made that happen?
Let's see. I can go back. I think I won. Joe, you struggled to begin the year.
I did struggle, but now I think I'm up to 6-5 on a 3-game heater. While are you 5-6?
I am 6-5, going to be 7-5 after tonight.
Wow. I think I'll be at 6-5 or 6. No, that'd be 6-6 for me.
That's a good start. You started like 0-4. I started at 5-0, and then
No, Joe, you're about to beat me in Mundo, buddy.
Oh no.
I mean, hey, I'm a veteran. I just want to win.
I lost you, Joe.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a real shame.
Week 9.
You know, honestly, for a team like me, this is a fantasy show. I just want to talk about quarterbacks really quick. It's been up and down because of my quarterback play. We're in a 2-quarterback league, no PPR. I have Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, and Baker Mayfield. And to be honest with you, it's a mixed bag with those 3 guys. You get your good and your bad. Baker sits a lot on my bench. Derek Carr's been hot at times, but then he's off a little. Stafford's hot at times, and he's off a little. So I've been driven by my quarterback play, and when they're hot, my team's hot, and when they're not, I'm not. So
yeah, our matchup, you won 115-106, and that was the week Kyle Allen had started. I sat Joe Burrow because of the bye. Kyle Allen got a concussion within the first 10 minutes of the game, had 3 points for me. So we'll chalk it up to that one.
Yeah, that was a devastating moment for 2 QB starting league owners when they had to start Kyle Allen, and he was looking pretty decent, and then he went down with an injury, probably costed more people than you their matchup. Joe got the best of him that week. Without that, we're going to let Joe go. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, it got a little noisy there at the end. That was Joe. Thanks for jumping in, Joe.
He was a mess today. He had the TV on. He was on mute.
lot of little things. Gotta love it though. Bill, how we doing?
I'm great, man. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Great. Thanks for being able to join us here for a little bit about the Chicago Bears in fantasy football. First and foremost, he is the co-host of the current dormant podcast of Cardboard and Cracker Jacks. We are going to start a revival of that. We're just kind of waiting for the COVID-ness to this baseball season. We didn't cover a lot at the end. We're waiting for it to officially turn the chapter. Once the hot stove starts heating up a little more, we're going to get back to you with the episodes as soon as this weekend. But that's on for a different story. We're here to talk fantasy and football. Billy, Bears talk, fantasy talk. Mitch Trubisky's back starting. You wouldn't tell anyone to pick him up in fantasy, would you?
I might. He's a garbage time quarterback. Look at him the last game. Maybe 1 touchdown before the fourth quarter, and then had 2 within the last 20 minutes or 10 minutes. So garbage time. He can run. He has weapons. So I don't know. It's hard. It's hard because that offensive line is so trash that the running game for him ain't going to be that strong, but it's better than most. So if you're handcuffed with him as a quarterback, you got COVID going on, and he's available, I'd say pick him up just in case. But I don't know. If you had something better to start, then start him.
Yeah, I mean, Trubisky's had 2 okay games in terms of fantasy this year. So I guess if you do need a guy who is going to compile garbage time statistics, he has some opponents on his schedule coming up that are favorable. He has the currently dismissed Matt Patricia-led Lions next week in Week 13. Then Houston and their weak defense, he's home against them in 14. And then Jacksonville eventually. So a couple weak defenses there. Other than that, David Montgomery had over 30 points in PPR formats last week. What would you say to people who own David Montgomery? He's a guy who's been not really boom or bust, but his ceiling hasn't been that high this year. But here he is. He had a 30-point game. Would you tell fantasy owners to keep David Montgomery in the lineup, or would you tell him come playoff time, hey, let him ride the bench?
So I actually have David Montgomery. So I personally would let him ride the bench unless you have a deep league with flexes. I know I had Mixon out, and I think that was it. So I subbed him in. I even had Jordan Wilkins. I asked you on your pregame show on Sunday, how's that worth starting? And not horrible. He hit a couple points, but yeah, I was pretty handcuffed. I had to start Jordan Montgomery. I was very, very happy with the success he had on Sunday night. So other than that, the Bears are really bad red zone. So he's not going to get the scores. But he's a good back. He's got no line blocking for him, so it's a little bit harder for him.
Yeah, Wilkins actually had a decent receiving game, so be it he had a 35 receiving yards, but on the ground, nothing. Not to my expectations. I think what happened was the Colts were in a little bit of a dogfight. I thought that the Colts were going to come out, lead that game. I thought they were going to really rely on the ground, and obviously Jonathan Taylor being on that COVID list, I thought that Wilkins would have to be relied on a little more. He didn't have a bad game, but in terms of fantasy, a little lackluster. Nothing like his Week 8 at Detroit matchup when he went 20 carries for 89 yards and a touchdown with a 24-yard catch. So he's shown a little signs of life here and there this year. I think that's really good analysis on Montgomery. He's one of these guys that at this point in the season, depending on what COVID, depending on what injuries, whatever's being had, it almost makes him a guy that you have to have in your lineup at this point, depending on bye weeks, injuries, COVID, and whatnot. If you're in a 3 running back league like us, definitely for sure.
Absolutely.
Maybe if you're in a 2 running back league, you don't have to throw him in there. Once again, we're here with Bill Granato, avid Bears follower, co-host of Cardboard and Cracker Jacks. Bill, Allen Robinson, what's his status in Chicago? You think he's back in Chicago next year? Or you think he's going to be somewhere else?
No chance. They didn't give this man his contract this year. He hasn't performed up to Allen Robinson's standards of the previous 2 or 3 years. So I don't know if he's even worth paying. I think personally, my roommate and I were talking about it today. We should just blow this whole thing up. Start from scratch.
And real quick here, you can finish in a minute, but that's what happens when you build around defenses. If you don't get that offensive success in that 2 to 3 year span where the defense is in their prime, we've seen a lot of good defenses go to waste. We've also seen a lot of good defenses win the championships. It depends if the head coach and general manager could lay the right chips on the line. I mean, look, the Ravens won a Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer. The Buccaneers won a Super Bowl with Brad Johnson. So the right pieces could have definitely been laid for the Chicago Bears. Unfortunately, I mean, never say never. They could back their way in this year. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the case with this regime. Allen Robinson might be on his way out. And I think those down numbers might be, in fact, because of the quarterback play. I'm going to let you finish your thought on him, though.
No, absolutely. It's Allen Robinson, yeah, he produced, but I think his time in Chicago, rightfully so, is done. They tried to build a team around this quarterback, Mitch Trubisky. There was promise. I mean, I don't know what happened. I don't know what Ryan Pace was thinking. Virginia McCaskey shouldn't let this guy do anything else with the team. Fire him after this season. Don't let him make any trades. Don't let him sign anybody. Because if you look at what the Chicago Cubs did, Theo Epstein, ton of success. Only had 1 year left, knew that I'm not coming back next year, so I'm going to resign now. That way, because every move he's going to make isn't going to impact him and his success. So
yeah,
they just get this guy out of here now. Don't let him touch this team. Blow it up. Maybe get something for Khalil Mack. But it's hard because these last 3 years, I've never seen so much hype behind the Chicago Bears team. And it's just been so disappointing. They break my heart every Sunday. So, yeah, I'd rather see them purposely lose, or not purposely lose, but, rebuild and build it back from the ground up. It's hard. It's hard to watch.
It's a back and forth, constant, battle of will. Do we want to sneak in the playoffs, even though I don't think we're going to get too far? But, yeah, I want my team to be in the playoffs. Or do I want to blow this thing up? Do I want to rebuild? Do I want that high draft pick? I think the Bears are right in the middle. And, honestly, it's sad to say at this point. At first, clear-cut victory, Khalil Mack trade, they blew the Raiders out of the water. Nowadays, it's looking like perhaps the Raiders might have won that trade after it's all said and done because Khalil Mack, let's face it, the Bears never hit the expectations they quite should have with Khalil Mack. Blame what you want. Ryan Pace, definitely Eastern Illinois alum. I'm ashamed that that has to be my university alum brother. No, he's an NFL GM, so that is cool. He did reach that level, but he didn't really have the success and hopes that fans would hope. He had a lot of bad draft picks, a lot of bad free agent signings. Jimmy Graham, a really big amount of money for an aging tight end. You just hate to see that contract. Robert Quinn disappeared pretty quick this year. All of a sudden, right. Besides week one, he had a sack, and other than that, I'm not sure. All I know is guys like Mike Davis, Trey Burton, and their old Leonard Floyd are all pretty successful this year now that they're not on the Bears. So I'm not really sure if coaching or GMs to blame to that. What do you say about that?
Yeah, they don't know what to do with the tight ends. Matt Nagy does not know how to utilize a tight end. Trey Burton was productive his first year with the Bears, but then was rattled with injuries. He had a lot of anxiety issues going on, and I think that just added to it. Who's he on the Colts now?
Yep, the Colts.
He's having a pretty solid year, and it's a shame because it's like we had like 11 tight ends on the roster at one point, and it's like we can't even use one of them. Cole Kmet's not getting the touches. He can't catch the ball or hold on to it, so I don't really blame them for that. But you drafted this guy in the second round, and he's done nothing. Leonard Floyd, irrelevant on the Bears last year and the year before that. I don't know if it's Aaron Donald that helps him out here, but he's making an impact over in LA. Where was he here? It's just a shame seeing all these guys have success after we let them go.
Yeah, and that might be a part of it. Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and defenders like that perhaps helping out the case for Leonard Floyd. But at the end of the day, Leonard Floyd had Khalil Mack here. He had good defensive backs here as well, the lock-up coverage like Eddie Jackson, Kyle Fuller, in years past, Prince Amukamara and whatnot. So it's not like he never had defenders here. He had the big dude who opted out. And then he also had Akeem Hicks up the middle as well. So he's had a lot of good defensive help that seemed like in the good young linebacker who signed with the Raiders, Kietowski. So there's been help. It's interesting to see what's going on. But nonetheless, the Bears could still maybe get in the playoffs. They got a favorable schedule. One last question to leave you with, Bill. Would you rather see at this point the Bears go for it and still get in the playoffs? I know you said blow it up earlier, but at the end of the day, you always kind of want to see your team get there. Or do you think, hey, it is time, they should just tank, they should try and get their coach fired, start over at that point?
Absolutely. The fan in me, you want them to go win outright the rest of the year. You want them to make a run in the playoffs, but that's the fan in me right now. The fan in me in 2 years, you don't know what could be, right? So if they blow it up now and then say they have a hot pick and a quarterback, and they go on a run, I'm fine with that. Chicago's predominantly now known for their defenses. We're not going to have a good defense. That's just bottom line. Even when we're bad, we have a solid defense. So, I'd like them to see this blow this whole offense up because it's really hard to watch.
Yeah, it is hard to watch, and the Bears had a lot of primetime games, so a lot of football fans had to watch their offense. They did beat the Buccaneers, however. Speaking of Bucks, coming up shortly here in a minute once we let Billy go, we got A-Cats, Andrew Katzman, lifelong Buccaneer fan, often podcast member, contributor, hopping into the Skew Zone to talk Buccaneer football for about 10 to 15 minutes. But Bill, real quick here, where can the people follow you at on Twitter? And just keep grinding in fantasy the rest of the year, my man.
Yeah, man. How's your other teams doing?
They're doing pretty good. I won a close matchup today. I ended up winning by 3. The guy against me had Chase Claypool. He was held out of the end zone, thankfully. I had Miles Sanders, who was disappointing. He's a candidate to skew you for people next week. I like to call it watch for people to sit Miles Sanders. He's going to tell people skew you and go off next week because he really disappointed this week. And if it wasn't for that 2-point conversion, which costed a lot of people money in Vegas, ran by Miles Sanders.
$100 to me.
Yeah, I had Eagles 6.5 too, so that was a little helpful.
So they can follow me at bgranats95. That's BGRANATS95 on Twitter, and then Wild Bill 95 on Instagram.
You heard it there. And he's also the co-host of Cardboard and Cracker Jacks, who's a proud member of the TSPN. Look for their restartup show next week. Bill, thanks again for joining us. You have a great night.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yep. That was Bill Granado, a great guy, co-host of Cardboard and Cracker Jacks. What a guy. And we went over Bears football. He had a lot of hot takes, a lot of good fantasy football knowledge there. He is the co-host of Cardboard Cracker Jacks. That is one of my shows as well, a memorabilia show where we go over baseball talk as well. We're in for a treat here next, but real quick before we get to A-Cats, and guys, when I say a treat, he has a lot of hot takes. He's got a lot of great takes. He's always hyped up. He's dedicated to talking. We're going to have him in here shortly. A-Cats talking Buccaneer football. But Bill had a lot of good opinions on the Bears. Man, it's tough to say, but it might be time for Chicago fans to look forward to the future. It might be time for them to pack up, which is really a shame because they began the year so damn good. And they did get a huge win against the Buccaneers on primetime football with Nick Foles, and then they kind of fell apart at the hip. Nick Foles, fantasy-wise and real-life-wise, just never panned out. Their one silver lining is they do have some fantasy contributors who are panning out, like Allen Robinson and David Montgomery. So go try and get those guys. Other than that, the Bears are in a bit of trouble. Speaking of trouble, are the Buccaneers in trouble? We're going to ask Andrew, our next guest here. We're going to bring him in. Andrew, we're going to talk with you about the Buccaneers, and we're going to talk about with Bruce Arians and more. Andrew, how are we doing tonight?
Oh, I'm good. It's cold here. It's not just Florida cold. It's cold. So, but otherwise, I'm doing all right.
Yeah. What's cold considered for your standards for Florida cold, brother?
It's about 36 degrees here, so that's cold to me. Florida cold's about 50, 55, 60 even. 36 is just cold.
Yeah, 36 is reaching pretty cold. Yeah, especially for Florida. So stay warm out there, brother. Speaking of warm, our Buccaneers are opposite of warm right now. They've kind of been in the media all week. Bruce Arians, a center, a punching bag of attention. Tom Brady, some old Bucs fans and new Bucs fans are ripping him apart. A lot of things are going on, but at the same time, I know they've lost 2 in a row, 3 out of the past 4, but the Buccaneers are kind of on pace for a lot of people's 10 or 11 win predictions. And all they need to do is kind of get a crack at the playoffs, in my opinion. They haven't done that in a long time. What say you to these haters, Andrew?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. These last 2 weeks or so, you faced one good opponent, one great opponent. The Rams game really could have gone either way. Unfortunately, had some what I would call uncharacteristic mistakes by Tom Brady. I know in recent weeks they've become a little more prevalent, more than what you're used to seeing with him. Still, as a team, they've cut down on them. It's not something that I panic about. They need the bye week badly, to be honest with you. I mean, week 13 is late for a bye. However, you want to go into the playoffs fresh. Hopefully we get there first things first, but you are going to be a little bit fresher as long as you avoid the virus, like Bruce Arians said. So it's been an issue for a lot of teams coming out of the bye.
Yeah, and the Buccaneers, as you said, have done a pretty good job so far to avoiding the virus. So kudos to Bruce Arians and his staff for that. And to this point, I think the bye week couldn't have came at a better time. Perhaps the only better time it could have came has been last week. So Andrew, what do you look for Coach Arians to do coming out of the bye? And what do you say about all these people criticizing Bruce Arians? Are you on their side of, hey, this is kind of Bruce's fault, he's riding the ship wrong here? Or do you think that it's more the players and assistant coaches that are making these mistakes?
Well, I think it's always, and I know this is going to sound a little bit like a cliche and a non sequitur type of answer, but it's a little bit of both, in my opinion. You try to set your players up for success as best you know how. You watch the Bucs game plan sometimes, and you look at the Rams, and you look at Kansas City, you look at New Orleans a few weeks ago. It seems like offensively they make things a little bit more difficult for themselves than they need to. There's some low percentage plays in there. Now, when they work, you really don't hear much criticism about it. But sometimes it just looks like they're a little bit out of sync. I do think part of that, we did not have a preseason. Obviously, as great as Brady's been, he's been playing over 20 years. It is a new offense for him. It just looks like they're a little bit out of sync. Like Tony Romo started to say in the second half, he was seeing some things coming along. You could see they put some drives together. Byron's play calling has some weird tendencies. I don't really understand why when you have Rojo going the way he was, you pull him out on the goal line to put Fournette in there, which they seem to always do on the goal line. That's a tendency we've noticed. The guy's not Mike Allstott. He's not, I was not crazy about the signing. And to me, he's just a big, and it seems to kind of take the air out of the team, which you saw on that first drive in the second half, which was very important as it turned out based on how the game unfolded. So it is somewhat on the coaching. I don't necessarily like the player usage there in some regards.
Yeah, Leonard Fournette, I'm glad you brought him up. He runs timid out there ever since his injury. He had the one big game prior where he went over 100 yards. But, man, I call him Twinkle Toes because whenever he gets the football, I feel like he starts kind of toe tipping. He runs a little scared. He runs timid. He doesn't try and hit the hole, I feel like. He doesn't try and hit the gap. And Ronald Jones is clearly our best running back. And not only that, he's our best bruiser back, I feel like. So the fact that we continue to take him out on goal line situations is really puzzling to me. I'm not really sure about that. And I agree. There have been some other coaching characteristic mistakes as well. But I do like Bruce Arians. I think he's done a really good job at assembling the coaching staff. And I think hopefully, like Tony Romo and like you pointed out, the second half was a tale of two cities. It was a new team coming together. As we know, as you said, we haven't really had a long offseason or a preseason. Tom Brady, one of the greatest ever. It's going to take anybody to adjust with any new team, in particular Bruce Arians' offense. We've seen time and time again these quarterbacks struggle with Bruce Arians' offense, a lot of interceptions. But Tom Brady's actually having a pretty good year in Bruce Arians' scheme compared to the other guys. Andrew, once again, we're here with one of the biggest Buccaneers fans around, one of the biggest Tampa Bay fans around, Andrew Katzman. Andrew, where can the people follow you at on Twitter?
Yes, A_Katzman83. You can follow me there.
Yeah, and a little bit of your Tampa fandom. I mean, you're a Lightning guy, you're a Rays guy, and you're a Bucks guy. Now it's football season. Obviously, you've seen great success with the Lightning winning the Stanley Cup, the Rays making it to the World Series and falling just short. What are your expectations with this Buccaneers team? I know a lot of people change your expectations. It seemed like they were saying 10 or 11 wins at preseason, but now they're freaking out, acting like this team sucks. It's the end of the world, Super Bowl or bust. A lot of stands, a lot of haters on Twitter. What are your thoughts on the Bucs? Are they going to end up like the other Tampa Bay teams with success, or are they going to fall short?
Well, I guess it depends on, how you define success. Now, the Buccaneers, the Lightning and the Rays, it was interesting. I was looking at this, and since the last time the Bucks made the playoffs, which was 13 years ago, didn't end well. They lost to the Giants. Very disappointing. Well, that was a great Giants team as it turned out, or well, they did win the Super Bowl. The Lightning and the Rays have made the playoffs 13 times combined in that time. So, it's been a long time for the Bucks. I too had them at a 10-11 win team before the season. There were a lot of people saying, "Oh, this team's going to breeze through. They're going to win 12. They're going to win 13 games." I didn't see it that way. Having said that, that doesn't mean that I'm looking at this season and saying, "Ah, man, we suck." I think the way you get to it, 7-5, you're in a position where you're playing four teams rather, Atlanta twice, so it is three different teams that are under 500 right now. Ultimately, as a team, you want to really clean up the sub 500 teams and go around 500 against, your good opponents. We did see them knock off Green Bay. We knocked off not Oakland, Vegas. That's going to take a long time to get used to. We've seen some close losses. We've seen New Orleans clean their clocks twice. That's something that maybe you get a third shot at them in the playoffs. Maybe it's, again, you got to wait till next year. There's no way around it. They've had our number. They've been outcoached and outplayed in every facet the last 2 years, maybe a little more than that. But 10-6 is right there. That's still where I see them. I don't see them running the table. I think that's very hard to do. I don't see them winning less than 3 games either. Minnesota game is vital because the Vikings, assuming they beat Jacksonville with the win, would then have a tiebreaker over us. I do think the Bucks will be able to pull that out. You've got to be able to get a win coming off the bye, especially against a team that's right on your heels. But once you get in the tournament, anything's possible. We've seen some teams go in playing well, maybe not a top seed, but that doesn't matter. Once you're in, you have a chance. Everybody's 0-0. I don't look at home field as much of an advantage or disadvantage this year because there's no fans in the stadium. And unfortunately, this is a cold hard truth with the Bucks. They haven't had a winning record at home since 2008, which is ridiculous. Starters. They have a chance to do that. They win the final 2 at home. We'll see one at a time. So, but nonetheless, and they've also lost their last 2 home playoff games. You're going back a long time on that. So I don't really worry about that. You just want to get in there. You want to be playing your best football. I don't care who you're playing at the end of the year. You want to, A, stay healthy. That's your first MO. But B, you really want to be going in there playing well. We've seen teams do that, sneak in playing well. Unfortunately, that Giants team I referenced, the one that beat the Bucks the last time we were in the playoffs, most of that year kind of sputtered along a little bit. They got in, they got hot, they managed to win the Super Bowl. The Bucks started the season very well. If you told me they were going to start well and then kind of sputter, I would have thought it would have been the other way around. So it's kind of surprising how they've gotten to 7-5, but ultimately, they've still put themselves in a position for a playoff game. It would be very, to say disappointing would be an understatement if they do not even make it at this point. Given the start they got off to, they set themselves up for success. They just got to finish the job here in the regular season. And once you're in, you start looking at opponents. You look at Green Bay, you look at Seattle as potential opponents. I feel you can match up with them well. Neither team is great defensively. Both teams have great quarterbacks, and I think either way it'd be a great game. And hopefully the Bucks get that opportunity in the playoffs. And once you're there, anything can happen. But like I said, I don't put as much stock in home field this year as I would. And Brady's won his share of playoff games both at home and on the road. So just want to get in there, be healthy, play well, and you've got an opportunity to do that over these final 4 weeks.
Yeah, and once again, we're here with A-Cats, Andrew Katzman, a lifelong Tampa Bay sports fan. A couple minutes here, we're going to be joined by Big Reek and Mike to go over Cleveland Browns. But, man, Andrew just laid down so much good facts and points about Tampa. I can't believe we haven't had a winning record at home in that long. Honestly, that's a really, really bad and poor statistic for the Buccaneers to not have a winning home record in double-digit years. I am 3-0 in Buccaneers home games in that span, so maybe I should go to Tampa Bay games more often, I figure.
We got to get you some tickets. We got to call the Buccaneers up, man, and hook you up with some tickets, maybe lifetime season ticket holder there, because that's something. I mean, I've been to, oh gosh, I don't know how many games in my life, a lot of games. I've walked out of that place with my head down a lot of times. Granted, I was there for every home game in the Super Bowl season. I'm grateful for that. So I've walked out, have had some amazing times at Ray J. But those amazing times have been long ago. There have been a couple over the years. There have been some good games I've been to. I've seen some good wins, but more often than not, I've been walking out with my head between my legs saying, oh, man. And usually there's a lot of opposing team fans that have been in there and got to leave happy, and they get to enjoy our beautiful weather while we see our team lose. So it's been tough. And this year, you start 3-0 at home. You figure, well, they're finally going to break that streak. Well, now you're 3-3 at home. Got to win those final two to get to that. You might not need to win both games at home to get in the playoffs, but I said Minnesota is vital for this team. If you lose that game, all of a sudden you could be on the outside looking in. But yeah, it's a crazy statistic. It's a ridiculous statistic. I'm not sure if any other team, other than perhaps the Browns, can say that because it's over a decade. And I don't know what else to say about that, actually. I'm going to not say anything else because it's really depressing.
Yeah, it's really not happy, and I think I'm always the away fan when I leave games disappointed. I'm out here in Chicago, so I'm either leaving Soldier Field or Actually, back in the day, we won a good amount at Soldier Field. Last couple of times, that's a different story. The last time I was at Soldier Field, I almost left the game. We lost by like 40 points. So I had to tuck my head in between my legs. That was a bitter loss. I've left Lambeau a loser. I've left Lucas Oil in Indianapolis a loser a couple times. I'm a road loser, I call myself.
I haven't been to a road Bucks game in, I think, it was Atlanta 2002, and they did win that game, and it was a great win. Brooks had one of his many touchdowns in that game. Boy, have I got, I think last year some friends asked me, you want to go to Jacksonville for the game? And I was like, I really don't feel like sitting in the car for 5 hours to drive across. The Bucks did win that game. I did not go. So yeah, the 48-10 game you're referencing, goodness, man, I don't watch the Bears a lot, but if you watch that game and never saw him any other time, you'd have thought Mitchell Trubisky was the real deal and he was going to be a future Hall of Famer and franchise quarterback. Obviously, hasn't worked out that way for the Bears, much like the Bucks. That's been a bugaboo over their history. But both teams, I heard your co-host on here before me mentioning the Bears. They've had similarities to the Bucks. They usually have had good defenses historically. The Bucks not so much in recent years, but when they've been successful, they've had a good defense. We are much better there this year. I know recency bias. You look at what KC did, but it's tough for any team to defend them. You did hold them to 27 points. I know at the end they could have probably scored some more if they wanted, if they needed. But the Bears and the Bucks have struggled when it's come to quarterbacks. Both have taken a lot of chances on first-round picks. The Bears had Jay Cutler. The Bucks have had the likes of Jeff Garcia. Both have had Brian Griese. Neither have really been able to make it stick. I think that's why you've seen the Bucks go to Tom Brady now. When I thought about it, I said, you spend the better part of 10 years with Josh Freeman and Jameis Winston, and no disrespect to either of those guys. Both had their moments. Ultimately, I don't look at wins as a QB stat, but both of them, they did not make the playoffs with either of them. And I think as the Bucks, you say, all right, we're going to move on here and go back to a veteran quarterback. We haven't been in the playoffs since we had a veteran in Jeff Garcia, so let's try that again. We got to put the future, whatever that is, 3 years, 4 years on hold for now and try to get this team back in the playoffs because 13 years that shouldn't happen. Not in the salary cap era, especially because we saw a team that went, actually, it was 15 years before in there, and that was in the non-cap era before Dungy got here, that they went without a playoff berth. So you got to do what you have to do, at least. For starters, it's a playoff berth. Once you get there, you can really make your mark. But 13 years without one, you do what you have to do to try to get back there for starters and then see what you do once you get there. That's why I had no problem with them bringing Tom Brady in. I wouldn't have had an issue with a couple others, but he's a guy you bring in because this is, as fans, as someone who's been a season ticket holder, who's been to tons of games, enough is enough. That's why I can't look at, well, if they don't win the Super Bowl, it's a failure. I try not to look at things in such black and white terminology because when you look at where this team has been, I'm used to looking at draft prospects now. Actually, I'm looking at you guys who are smarter on draft prospects. I watch the 1 minute cut up videos and talk myself into them. I'm tired of that whole thing. Well, we better lose this week or we're going to lose our draft position. Hey, silver glass half full, we're not in that position right now. mean, grateful for that. Disappointed, yes, with how the last few weeks have gone, but grand scheme of things, man, it's nice not to be talking about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. For a Bucks fan and follower in general, it's just nice to be considered into the playoffs this late into the season. Obviously, we have been here and there sporadically in the hunt to this time, but the odds were never really in our favor. Things obviously didn't go our way, as you said a couple times now. We have not made the postseason in 13 years. And as you said, to really carry on your point, Tom Brady, you do what you got to do to make the playoffs. We brought in Brady. We brought in Gronk a couple of years ago. We brought in JPP, Shaq Barrett last year. These are all Super Bowl champions, guys who know how to win. They've really been trying to change the culture, trying to make that playoff run. And I agree. You start with the playoffs and then you focus on the Super Bowl. So you've hit the nail on the head all night tonight. Andrew, my man, any last words here before we let you go?
Nothing else. I very much appreciate you having me, and I hope I'd love to join again. Hopefully, obviously, we got a bye this week. I would normally say, well, you can't lose to the bye week, but with COVID around, like I said, you got to stay COVID free. The last thing you need is to be losing players at this point, but team needs it. Hopefully, after the Minnesota game, we're 8-5, and we're looking at pretty much looking down the barrel at that playoff spot. But again, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And I think you hit the nail on the head. This might be the first year ever where you can indeed lose to the bye week. COVID has been getting people during the bye week. Andrew, thanks so much. We'll have you on here in the near future, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. Have a great one.
You too. Thanks, Andrew. And that's a lifelong Tampa Bay sports fan, A-Cats, Andrew Katzman, great guy. I've, known him for a long time now. I've actually met him at a Rays game a while ago, so that was really cool. Just one of the nicest guys, most genuine guys, and sports knowledgeable guys around. Real quick, we're going to bring in Big Reek in here. Mike, we're going to talk Cleveland Browns here, and we're going to wrap up with the Cleveland Browns and fantasy football about the Browns. I'm going to answer 3 of these questions quick we got coming. It's Fragger, how you doing? Start Wayne Gallman or Mostert. I'd go Wayne Gallman if Devontae Freeman does not play. Obviously, he's on IR. He's probably not going to play. I'd go Wayne Gallman, the touchdown machine. If he does, Mostert's still a good play, but 49ers backfield's a little crowded at this point. Then he says, is it time to drop Zeke too? No, don't drop Zeke. Bench Zeke. Don't drop Zeke. You never drop Zeke. He's a top pick. He's still a really good running back. I mean, if you look at Zeke's numbers with a capable quarterback this year, they've been really good. They've started stumbling and fumbling when Dak went out, and you never know. A top draft pick like Zeke, he could still go off. Real quick, one more question before we bring in the man, the myth, the legend, Mike from Big Reekin on Sports. Timothy Park, thanks for the question, Tim. Tim says, do I trade Michael Thomas for Swift PPR? Absolutely. Taysom Hill can't throw. Taysom Hill can't get Michael Thomas the football. Absolutely, you do it. Go get DeAndre Swift. He's going to come back, hopefully healthy from a concussion, and lead the way for the Lions backfield the rest of the year. And to me, be a good fantasy football running back for playoff runs. I don't think Michael Thomas gets any traction with Taysom Hill. Here we go. We're going to bring him in, Big Reek, and we're going to talk Cleveland Browns football. Hey, Mike, how we doing?
What's going on, Tone?
Hey, thanks so much for joining me. I know it was last minute, but yeah, I'm like, man, we got to get Mike on. I'm dying to talk Cleveland Brown. After our interaction the other day, I loved it. I'm like, I got to be talking Cleveland Browns with Mike.
Yeah, I got to tell you, if you'd have told me at the beginning of the year that I was going to be a prophet and they'd be 8-3 after 11, like I said they would, you can't be unhappy. But if you read Brown's Twitter, no one is happy.
And isn't that kind of funny? I mean, first of all, how rude of me. We're here. We're joined by the great host of the Big Reekin on Sports. We're joined by Mike Martinez, big Browns fan, big New York sports guy as well for the Mets and Ohio State as well. We'll talk about that shortly. But Mike, isn't that kind of funny? The Browns are in an 8-3 spot. Obviously, the best they've been in so long, and fans are freaking out. I know, obviously, the Bucks have a lot more height, like 7-5. Some fans are disappointed, but they're still in the playoffs. They haven't made the playoffs in 13 years. Fans still aren't happy. Isn't it just funny? Our teams are here. They're both in playoff spots, and now all of a sudden, our fan bases now want to start acting like shit's hitting the fan.
Yeah, what kills me is that, you know, I'm living in upstate New York now, but I was able to listen to and watch some of the Browns, especially the Philadelphia game, which is on here. And the criticism is of Baker Mayfield. Well, let's talk about Baker Mayfield. Let's talk about he will become the third quarterback all time to go for 3,500 yards and 20 touchdowns in his first 3 seasons to follow Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning. But it's not good enough. Why? Because the national media says the guy's got to throw for 400 a night and 4 touchdowns. Baker has the best tandem backfield in the game in Chubb and Hunt. Baker has weapons that are playing well, and he has an offensive line playing elite. Why does he have to blow it up if you're getting 102 yards a game from Nick Chubb?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm honestly thinking to myself, and what I've been thinking lately, I'm a big fan of Mike Zimmer and the things he was able to do in Minnesota up until obviously this point. I think now they're struggling a little bit. But honestly, I think that Stefanski has done such a great job of like a copy and paste strategy of getting that offense to the next level with the running game. But having look at Minnesota, they had Delvin Cook and Alexander Madison, two good running backs. They have Justin Jefferson and Thielen, and then Kirk Cousins. I'd rather Baker Mayfield, but Kirk Cousins is kind of one of those. He's similar to Baker Mayfield a little bit. So then you look at the Cleveland Browns. You had the best running back tandem in the league with Chubb and Hunt. Then you got the two. They set it up where you had Beckham. Obviously, he's lost for the year. And Landry, 2 grade A receivers. And then you had a good quarterback. And then they traded for their Austin Hooper, their version of Kyle Rudolph. I think they did a tremendous job of setting up their offense. I think Cleveland's a force to be reckoned with. They've played some really good football this year. Yeah,
they have. And the big key is getting Myles Garrett back this week to play against Tennessee. That'll be huge, especially with having to stop Derrick Henry. But the thing I asked somebody this the other day in a Browns stream I was talking to, and I said, if I'd have told you we're in week 12, 13, and Odell's been hurt for more than half the year and we're 8-3, what would you have done? They're like, oh, I'd take that. Well, if you take it, what are you complaining about? If you
some people are never happy.
But that's most Cleveland Browns fans. And let's look at it this way. The defensive player of the year just missed the last 2 games. They are out their number 4 overall draft pick, who is an all-pro corner. And they're 8-3.
Yeah.
There is no reason for fans to be mad. I'll tell you what the Browns can definitely need to get better on. They need to get off the field on 3rd down. I know you guys and the boys from Time Skew loved on Sunday when I tweeted out the Browns can't stop a nosebleed on 3rd down. And that was against Mike Glennon. I don't know who Tannehill thinks he is with his resurgence in Tennessee. I think that's more of an indictment on Adam Gase than anything else. But listen, if the Browns can't get off the field this week, it's 8-4. If they can get off the field on 3rd down, it's 9-3. Especially with Myles back against a run-blocking offensive line in Tennessee. Their pass blocking hasn't been the greatest. He's going to take advantage of it. And their best offensive lineman is now on the offensive line with the Browns and Jack Conklin after the Taylor Lewan injury.
Yeah, and Conklin got that big contract early this offseason. I know a lot of people rumored, where's he going to go? Is he going to go back to Tennessee? The Browns were rumored to be the big favorite. A lot of people said, Cleveland isn't going to follow through. Cleveland ended up following through, and not only did they follow through, that contract's paid off big time to this point. Once again, we're here with Big Rican. Mike Martinez, host of the Big Rican on Sports podcast. For a couple more minutes as we close out this show, the Cleveland Browns been playing tremendous football this year. They have a chance to really solidify themselves this Sunday in a game with Tennessee. If they win this game, it really puts them in perspective for the playoffs. And Mike, another thing is that you haven't even mentioned yet is the division that they play in. The fact that they're doing this in the division they play in, an undefeated Pittsburgh, a good Baltimore team, although they've been struggling, but hey, they're going to adjust back. They'll win a couple games. They'll finish above 500, 9-7. And then Cincinnati, Joe Burrow and T. Higgins, a couple good rookies, were playing well over there before Burrow went down. The Browns not only have been playing well, they've been playing this well in a really good division.
Yeah, and the thing that I take away from that is the Browns are 2-2 in the AFC North. Both wins against Cincinnati, and tough losses against both teams early, against Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Getting them now, because Baltimore, of course, lost today to Pittsburgh. Baltimore plays Monday night against Dallas, and the following Monday night in Cleveland. Now, not for nothing, but did you see what happened in Cleveland yesterday?
Cleveland yesterday. What happened there?
My parents have 2 feet of snow at their house.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
That's going to be a big factor.
especially with Lamar.
Yeah. Lamar ain't gonna. And that's if he comes back from this COVID bug.
Yeah, and again, I hope he's healthy. That's obviously most important. But no, the Browns have a really good chance. And honestly, it's Tennessee, it's Baltimore, it's 2 weeks in New York to play the Giants and the Jets, and it's Pittsburgh at home to end the season. What would the city of Cleveland do if this team wins out and goes 13-3?
I don't think they would know what to do with themselves. I remember just like yesterday that Cleveland, the bars in Cleveland were giving out free booze for the Browns winning their first game. I think that was a Thursday night football game where Tyrod Taylor went down. Baker Mayfield came in against Sam Darnold, perhaps.
I was in Cleveland that night because I went to the Ohio State-Tulane game on Saturday. So I came in on Thursday. My buddy and I drove to Columbus on Friday. There were 10 refrigerators with something like 80 beers in them a piece. And it was insanity. And the day after they won, Cleveland looked like they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
It really is. And listen, as far as what they're going to do this weekend, I know you were talking the fantasy angle with the questions. Looking at Tennessee's defense, they also have had problems stopping the run. Chubb and Hunt will both be a nice play this weekend. But don't sleep on Jarvis. Jarvis had a huge game against Jacksonville. I think him and Baker are finally in sync, and Baker looked really good on Sunday.
Yeah, he did, and thanks for bringing in fantasy. That's actually my last question here for you, as we are actually a little bit over time, but every guest has been tremendous tonight, so we thank everyone for coming on. We thank all of you for coming on. Mike, one last question. Besides not counting running backs, we know Hunt and Chubb, when they play, are must-owns, must-starts for fantasy owners. Tight ends and wide receivers only, and not including Landry either, because we know he's a superior. Who is one guy you would tell fantasy owners, maybe under the radar, on this Cleveland Browns team who catches passes that might help their bench in fantasy make a playoff run?
There's one or two, and one of them I did not think I would speak of this highly this year, and that's Harrison Bryant, the rookie tight end at Washington State. He has been absolutely phenomenal, had a couple of drops early, but he is a guy that not only is he helping in the running game, which the Browns are predicated on, he's catching a lot of balls too. But the other one is my favorite wide receiver on that team, and that's Hollywood Higgins. I love Hollywood. Him and Baker have something. Hollywood had offers on the table to go make more money. He stayed in Cleveland for less money because he loves to play there. I haven't done my research for Sunday morning yet, so I'm not well versed in Tennessee's secondary, but I think they're going to have to play the double high bracket on Jarvis, and that's going to leave either Kadero Hodge or Hollywood open, and Hollywood's the more dynamic of the two. So I take Hollywood.
Yeah, I think those are two good options as well. Cleveland has a lot of fantasy options all of a sudden. Pretty amazing to see them transform this far in a couple of years span. I hope they do go far. Mike, thanks so much for joining us tonight. As you leave, where can the people follow you on Twitter?
Well, on Twitter, it's at Big Rican on Sport. As a proud member of the Time Skew Podcast Network, thank you for having me on tonight, guys. The YouTube channel at Big Rican on Sport, Facebook. God willing, I'll be live Saturday morning to talk about Ohio State playing Sparty. And then the big one is next Friday, if Harbaugh doesn't chicken out and not play. Next Friday night will be live. Next Friday night will be an insane, fanatical preview of the 117th playing of the game between that soiled team up north and the Ohio State Buckeyes.
It sure is soiled, and I think Harbaugh might chicken out the type of year he's having, unfortunately. I think his time in Michigan's done, which is unfortunate for Ohio State fans because they were an easy target, an easy punching bag with Harbaugh coaching there. Easy wins all day, easy wins against Michigan with Harbaugh.
Yeah, no, I mean, we had a couple of close games. The 2016 game was an absolute epic first ever overtime game in the history of the run. But I'll tell you this, if it ends up coming to fruition what I read today, and he is the next head coach of the Detroit Lions, watch out for Tom Allen from Indiana to be the next head coach at Michigan, which is a problem. But, you know what? He better not chicken out. He better not chicken out.
That would be crazy if a Big Ten hired a Big Ten. He better not chicken out. I hope the people get what they want. Once again, thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have you back. We're going to have you on Bucketeers. We're going to have you on Cardboard and Cracker Jacks. We're going to be talking to you real soon, I'm sure. Thanks so much, Mike.
No problem. And don't forget, Hot Stove, you, me, and Alex coming up in a couple weeks.
Hot Stove, I'm getting hungry. I can't wait to talk baseball already.
Same.
Let's do it. All right, that's Big Mike, Big Rican, great member of the TSPN, proud member of the Times Skew Podcast Network. I'm Tampa Tones. Went 10 minutes over, but that's what happens when you talk great sports with great people. Check us out at TSPN Times Skew Podcast. We have everything. Check all our affiliates out at the TSPN _ on Twitter. Check them out at timeskew.com under the podcast Big Rican, Cleveland Meat Bucketeers, etc. I'm Tampa Tones. Thanks so much, everybody. You guys have a great night. You guys enjoyed. Thanks for jumping in to the Skew Zone. Wait, I think Mike might want to say something. Yeah, what's up, Mike?
Did you see they non-tendered Schwarber today?
Yeah, I did see that. Bob Nightingale reported that. Terrible.
I thought you were going to come back once you went off. My bad.
No, you're good. It's alive. But, yeah, we got breaking news there from Big Mike. Thanks again, Big Mike, for the breaking news. Big Mike breaking Kyle Schwarber news there, non-tendered. Thanks so much, Mike. Once again, everybody, thanks so much for joining the Skew Zone. Thanks again. Have a great night.